To a Clippers Talk Live. I'm Adam Osland. After a successful live stream last night, our first one on Clippers Talk After Dark during a basketball game, watching that Lakers-Minnesota game, seeing the debut of Braun and Bronny, calling it live. Couldn't get the right wing three to go off a pass from his dad, but, still a historic night for the Boston Celtics, who hit 29 three-pointers, not for Braun and Bronny. No, I'm kidding, only because I have a Braun fan on with me now. And some people think I'm one, but I am a fan of this guy. There's no doubt about it. Bob Schmidt, the voice of AM 570, LA Sports, Fox Sports Radio, and Fear the Fro Pod, which is probably the best and is the best Cavaliers pod in existence all time. And people are excited, I think, to have Bob on today. People are already in here. Thanks for being here, Bob Schmidt. How we doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
People are mad that they weren't first.
Yeah, I like that.
I like your first.
Seconds after the guy says, good morning.
So I thought of this yesterday because of a text from Bob Schmidt, and we will do this, and I'm sure he'll have me on if I'm lucky on Fear the Fro Pod as well when the Clippers take on the Cavaliers and have another big comeback late like they do every year against them. We'll do one of those shows at some point here. I don't even know what it is on the schedule.
March. I think you're deep March, if I recall. I know the one in LA is March 25th because I've already been trying to figure out. And I think the other one is just earlier in that month. There is a West Coast road swing usually around the end of December, early January. But I don't get you until March. I think it's both the games might be then.
Chat, help us out. Please
exactly.
Let us know when the first game is between the Clippers and Cavaliers. But if you aren't familiar with the Fear the Fro podcast, well, I'm going to get you familiar real quick here with one of Bob's parody videos that he does. And they're the best out there. And they should probably have like 1 million views, some of these things. But they should. The production level, the wit, the creativity, the lyrical composition. This is Bob Schmidt in his bag talking about Joel Embiid and doing it to bust a move. Here's the parody. This is one of the few I could find that wasn't too over the top or talked about killing a player or shoving things in orifices. Here it is.
Oh! Ow! Foul! Ooh, help me, refs! This here's a tale about a fellow flops around like he's made of jello. Hey, there's the floor. Time to take a dive. Help, referees! I'm lucky to be alive! Okay, JoJo, here's how it goes. Drop a shoulder, use an opportune elbow. Mix in a dive like a Life Alert patron.
I'm falling!
Selling sensation. Crunch time Cavs game. More of these same. Flip a switch. Time to play like a freight train. Mobley goes down. Trying to learn from you.
You alright? I learned it by watching you.
Charge on Joel. Refs say, oh, well, we'll just say it's marginal. Go to hell. This is the guy who's your MVP. Okay. If you want points given for free. You want it, JoJo? You got it. You want that? JoJo, you got it. Points for free. You want it, JoJo? You got it. You want that? JoJo, you got it. Points for free. I prefer my MVPs to score points legitimate.
You picked one that aged fantastically well, by the way. Not all of them do.
Yes.
I took some runs at Kyrie that were looking pretty terrible when he was in the finals last year. So.
I'm sure you guys enjoy that. Check out the rest of them at Fear the Fro Pod on YouTube. Also, his podcast is on Spotify and everywhere else. You can find it here. I've been on it before. A Chinese fan here saying, Jean Yang, I saw Kawhi's Chinese agent on Weibo, Chinese Twitter, said she will definitely be back before the playoffs. He will definitely be back before the playoffs. Okay, that's good to see, since the same person, if this is true, also had the report that was kind of ominous and cryptic from a few weeks or a month back now at this point. So we got March 18th game versus the Cavaliers, the first one. So yeah, we got some time. Okay. We'll have you on even before that. I'm not going to be able to wait that long to have Bob Schmidt back, and you'll see why in a little bit here. So he, to start things off, to bring this back to the Cavaliers and the Clippers, to get Bob in his wheelhouse. He texted me yesterday, and speaking of cryptic, I didn't know what the hell he meant by something he said in all caps to me. GOAT before the GOAT chooses violence. I was like, huh? What happened? Now, I don't have an iPhone, and some people, and this is, I don't understand why iPhone people just assume everybody else has one. I don't even think, like, I think Android has more of the market at this point because they have, a wider net with all their different types of phones versus just the iPhone. But everyone assumes you have one, and that's really annoying.
You just did the left wing media versus Fox News comparison where you're like, well, if we add all 25 of the other channels together, we have more users than the one predominant one that everybody else seems to go to.
Tis the season, all right? Election year. I had to parallel it with that.
Reasonable that I should assume that if I send you a photograph, you can receive it. Okay.
I received the second one. I don't know why the first one didn't come through. And in fact, you blamed yourself. So
well, I only did that because I'm a bigger man than you. And what I was sending you was something that I knew was going to rile you up anyway. So I pretended that it was my fault, but I don't really believe that deep down.
Okay. I didn't believe it either, actually. Adam Richards said, I can't believe Kawhi is sitting out tonight. Are you kidding? We gave up Shea for this. So this will tie in to a certain tweet from a former NBA player who is a former Cleveland Cavalier great. I don't know where he ranks on the Mount Rushmore of Cleveland Cavalier players for Bob Schmidt, who grew up one. He's also a Buffalo Bills fan. He's been through the wars. He's been through a lot. I didn't like this, though, and I will share the screen with you, Clipper Nation. I'm not sure how many people were alerted by this. I didn't know how active Mark Price is on X, who responded to an article from Sam Amico that also seems interestingly timed and maybe clickbaitish, saying Kawhi Leonard signed with the Clippers over the Lakers in 2019 because he wanted to, quote, go to a franchise where I could try to help build a legacy, unquote. Mark Price responded to that and said, you got to play to do that. To which I found offensive and unnecessary, but Bob loved it, saying he chose violence today.
Listen, sometimes this is just something comes across your timeline and you don't think twice about it. I just fired that off to you. It wasn't as if I didn't realize it was low-hanging fruit. It absolutely was.
Okay. Bob is a reasonable man. I should mention that. He's an NBA savant and all these things. I just wasn't sure. What do they want Kawhi Leonard to do? I always use the analogy of like scream at his knee. Don't be so hurt, knee.
You know what it is? It's Mark Price injures his back and they send him off to Washington, never to be seen again. So I think there's probably a little bit of like baked in as you go on longer and longer. You see guys cashing, $50 million checks and you were hacking it out 30 years ago for much less money and resentment and jealousy. Now, I don't know if that's the case. Mark Price has a podcast, actually. But it's like, it's very, it's not full of deplorables. So he's generally like an overly positive guy. I just think he has a relationship with that writer. And I know he's had him on the pod before and everything. So I think he was engaging for the sake of engagement and it was low hanging fruit. And yeah, I get why you would be annoyed by Mark saying that, but I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, he's not the only one, by the way. It seems a little bit to be bitterness, as you mentioned there, maybe, but just NBA players, especially, you hear a guy like Kendrick Perkins saying he should retire. Why would you tell anyone else what they should do with their career? Why would you say stuff like that? It's even worse when it comes from Stephen A. Smith, who obviously never played at a high level, is telling a professional athlete when their career should end, who has mentioned before the reason he keeps going is, one, he believes he can still play. And this was after Stephen A. Smith said it in 2023, and Kawhi came back last season and played 68 games and had the most efficient 30-game stretch in NBA history, putting up shooting splits of 57, 51, 90, which is pretty crazy. Again, by the end of the season, the knee was swelling up, and now he's not able to go opening night at Intuit Dome. But I think it's misplaced. Like, hating on a guy for being injured and something he can't control just seems like, as you put it, low-hanging fruit. And it should be beneath some of these people, but I guess they can't help themselves when it comes to getting attention in today's media landscape. Is that all this is?
Yeah, I think it is. I think when a guy is hurt a lot or when he's hurt at inopportune times, and it happens consistently. I mean, look at the chats. Like Embiid, those guys are going to get trotted back out because it's a chance for people to be like, "See, I told you so." I didn't believe in it, and look, we're right back where we were. So I don't even think a lot of it comes from a place of vitriol against the Clippers or Kawhi personally. I think it's just the culture we're in where, here's another instance where what I thought was going to happen happened, and now I'm going to rub it in everybody's faces who actually would have a vested interest in seeing Kawhi play. These aren't Clippers fans that are happy about this.
This bothers me too. Adam Richard here said maybe Kawhi doesn't take care of his body. Like, this is someone who stays in elite shape year round. If anyone doesn't deserve to have his body breaking down, it's probably Kawhi Leonard, with like him being at 8% body fat all the time.
Can I ask you, well, it's a two-part question now because you triggered me there. But what did you think of, did you see Anthony Davis's comments after the game last night about how beneficial he thought it was for him to, play in the Olympics, as opposed to a year ago, 2 years ago? I remember there was a lot of stories about, oh, he shut it down until after the 4th of July and he took a whole month off and he comes into the season, slower and not as crisp as you'd like. And he was absolutely dominant last night. Do you put any stock in this idea that, the way that the league kind of embraced load management compounded the problem, or do you think it's entirely coincidental?
I heard that before last year regarding Kawhi. What about playing more? Maybe the problem is he's not playing enough, not stressing it enough. First of all, he has very specific doctors regarding his injuries, and he's had the weird tendinopathy thing going back to San Antonio, which if you look up, it's like very specific how you have to treat something like that. But he played back-to-backs last season. He didn't load manage. He tried, Jennifer. He did everything he could, and he still got hurt. So whether or not he's trying to play all the games or he is taking back-to-backs off, there's no rhyme or reason to it. They can't figure it out. It's just a guy who's extremely injury-prone, and it's really unfortunate because he's a top 75 player ever, and anybody that loves basketball should want Kawhi Leonard to be out there. And if you're lashing out because he's not playing and you just miss seeing him, but you're also blaming him at the same time for not playing, it's just nonsensical, illogical, and irrational.
Yeah, I mean, and just in general, blaming for people for injuries is ridiculous. Unless, of course, you get injured throwing an elbow into Jared Allen's face, and then I don't feel any sympathy for you. But yeah, I mean, I remember this. Well, not this time last year, but probably December, January time. We were having conversations about how ridiculous Kawhi's season was, and how consistent he'd been, and how the MVP type numbers, and to see where it is now, I feel for it because it's not dissimilar from what the off seasons have been like for Cavs fans. We made it through the Knicks series, and Jared Allen took 3 months of bullets, and then we're back here because he had a chunk of rib floating around and didn't come back to play. And it's the same storyline a year removed, even though during the regular season, Allen strung together 81 consecutive games in a row before he went down with that injury. So, I just think there's some people who they have a narrative about, well, this is a guy you can't count on or whatever. And even if there's some validity to it, and they like to highlight it every time there's something that makes it feel like, okay, see, I was right. I was right. Look where we are.
These guys, there's also something to, I think, the older crowd and the get off my lawn or get off my cloud, shaking their fist at cloud crowd that wants to feel like guys were tougher back in their day. So they will highlight guys missing games more now. Even though the movement in the half court is way different than it used to be back then, and you're running more miles than ever, there's this false narrative. I've talked about it a little bit last night. We don't have to go too much further into that as people continue to talk about it and push false narratives. Like our Chinese friends saying maybe they just need to change the team doctor, take the knee swelling this long. They have all the doctors in the world. They have the best medical team. Kawhi has his own people too. It's not anything like that. It's just the human body and how unpredictable it is. And the other part is, Bob, we get a lot of from Clippers fans, they're not being transparent enough about what's going on with Kawhi. And I can understand it to an extent, but there's also a privacy issue there. And no one can know when he's going to be back because the problem is he's going through all this strengthening of the right knee. Well, they have to see, okay, you do this exercise. Does it swell up again? Does it respond the way we want it to? Then we can move on to the next step. That's basically what I'm guessing is happening right now because he's not practicing with the team. So how can you put a timeline on it when Kawhi can't even know when it's going to feel right? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. No, it's a no-win situation. It's a no-win situation. I don't think it's, ambiguity for the case of gamesmanship. You're not making that case. So it'd be one thing if you felt like, okay, he's right on the brink of coming back and you're trying to alter how teams play. But even in the NBA, that's a silly approach to take. Because people know what he can do and people know when he comes back, like what they're going to attempt to do. So
I feel for him. I feel for the Clippers organization and Clippers fans too. I know how frustrating it is, guys. I know it's,
sucks.
it's shocking that we are at opening night and the same injury that Kawhi Leonard had with the knee swelling going back to April is holding him out now. That is something that I did not foresee, but I did talk about it in April. Like, this is something that's scary, and I wonder, with the unpredictability of the right knee, how this is going to go moving forward. Some people are saying it's going to be fine. He's not going to play in back-to-backs. It's like, dude, the basketball stuff is what's causing the swelling from everything that we know. That's what's scary. It's like, if you can do all these other things training-wise and get through that, that still isn't basketball. That still isn't playing 5-on-5 high-level ball, which seems to be the issue for it because that's when the swelling has occurred. Okay, so here's something to get off of the Kawhi injury talk, which we really can't speak to or go down too far of a path with. Last night, I guess the Inside the NBA guys did a top 50 player ranking thing, and it was all over the place. And at first, I thought they were saying all time, and Chuck had LeBron James 11th, and to me, that's like not that surprising. Like, he would probably do that, but I guess it's for current NBA players. Bob, what's your feelings about this, where they have Kawhi Leonard rank and Chuck just unranked him because he said
I'm less offended by the unranked thing, honestly. Like, if you're gonna, because clearly this is editorializing and saying, well, he's not worthy of being ranked because you can't rely on him to actually be on the court. That's one thing. You're making a statement with your vote. That's like people who break up a unanimous vote. I'm not that offended by it. I don't know if you saw this, Adam, but did you see where Donovan Mitchell landed?
I did not. Where'd they have him?
Well, Chuck had him at 43rd.
Oh, my God.
And Aaron Gordon was in the 20s. Like, it was ridiculous. He had two
Idiots.
Celtics in the top 7. So I love the show from an entertainment standpoint, but objectively, analytically, these guys are they don't put time into it. There's
What do you mean?
They're sitting there writing down what they're saying, and they're just spitting out names top of mind. So I wouldn't be offended by 15 for Kawhi. I don't think that's crazy. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, if he's healthy, he's going to be in the second team All-NBA, third team All-NBA consistently. He's clearly a top 15 player or just outside of it, depending on how guys perform. So I think that's fine. Shaq, I would say that's low. But again, I mean, when you look at this list, if you look bigger than beyond the scope of just the Clippers, there are so many just objectively awful rankings on this thing. So
Yeah. And
I glanced at the top 50 and I was like, I'm going to keep it moving. They didn't put any thought into this.
Well, and that's par for the course with them, unfortunately. While some people want to say, these are the former players, they know more about the game than you ever will. Yeah, they also had Donovan Mitchell in the 40s on a top 50 list. That's insane. And I can understand where Chuck's coming from with unranked, but when he said it's because the best ability is availability and he never plays, the guys were quick to respond and say he just played 68 games last season. He just finished All-NBA second team, which means you're a top 10 player. Like, there's an easy way to go about this, and he still went with unranked, but I'm not surprised.
I think he probably would have been more offended by if you actually knew what number he assigned to him. Because I think I take less offense to it from Chuck because it's not doubling down on disrespecting him and then also saying he's worse than a bunch of guys who, when healthy, he's clearly better than.
Yeah, and when healthy, as we talked about last season, he was playing at a top 5 level throughout, I'd say, half the year. He was right there. Half the games he played in, he was right there, and the Clippers looked like the best team in the league for a considerable amount of time when they went 26-5 during that 31 game stretch. But this season, it's a new era they're entering. First of all, Kawhi Leonard's not playing to start the year. It's a James Harden team to me at this point, Bob. Like, it is. It has to be because of the lack of availability. I think it's fair to say James Harden has to be the guy, and because of the position he plays. And he has been a tank and for the most part relatively healthy and reliable throughout his career. And unfortunately, with Kawhi's health, it's been unreliable with that right knee. What questions do you have about this Clippers team and where they could end up landing in the Western Conference? Because you got people like Bill Simmons banging they're going to be under 37.5 wins drum, which, if you tell me Kawhi's only playing 20 games or something like that, maybe that's possible. And the West is going to be brutal, but I feel like they could end up between 37 wins and 45 wins, like anywhere in that range right now, depending on how many games Kawhi plays.
No, I would agree with that. And I think Bill is probably predicting best, with the expectation that Kawhi is not going to be available for a huge majority of the games. It's tough. The West is tough. It's tough sledding. So I think the team has interesting things to follow, but as far as a win-loss record, I'm not all that optimistic. And it's just because it's hard to know what to expect.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The Western Conference in general, to me, I know we do this every season, but it looks better than ever on paper. You can say some of the high-end teams, maybe some of them got a little bit worse. I don't know how you felt about the Minnesota Timberwolves trade with the New York Knicks. The Denver Nuggets and Jamal Murray and his health looks a little bit murky right now and how he's playing or what level he'll be at. But your thoughts in general on the Western Conference, because heading in, once again, it's like there's 12 teams, it looks like, legitimately fighting for 10 spots, including the play-in.
I will say I thought Minnesota got better. I mean, I don't think last night indicated that. I thought they looked soft on the glass. I thought Davis just humiliated Gobert on the heels of that extension. And I think it's going to take time for some of those guys to gel. But there is a part of me that looks at that squad and says, okay, so they lost Slow-Mo. They lost Karl Anthony Towns, but they bring in Dillingham, who should be one of the higher impact rookies. They bring in Dante and Julius Randle. I thought Julius Randle looked very deferential last night. Like, I think that will change significantly. And I saw the comments in the post game, Rui talking about, him being exploitable on defense. And certainly there was truth to that, but I think you got to give that time to acclimate. And I think if I'm looking at, a situation where they had a great handcuff behind Karl Anthony Towns to bring in Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, who I think was one of the most underrated, sixth men who became essentially a starter with the Knicks because of all the injuries. I think he's fantastic. So I think that will pay dividends. And I also kind of like the young guys that they drafted. I know we didn't see Terrence Shannon Jr., and I know Rob Dillington didn't have to do much of anything last night, but I think what they did, they had to do because of the finances, and that was probably the primary motivator. But I do like that. I think they added to, kind of the quality of their depth. And I'm waiting to see on that one. In terms of Denver, I don't know what to think there. I think ultimately a lot of that is going to be dictated by health. I have concerns about Jamal Murray, but it's a long season. Maybe by the time that the postseason rolls around, they'll be clicking. They do have a lot of talent to try to pick up the pieces in the meantime. And I saw they got their extension done with Aaron Gordon. So they're running it back with the core group of guys. So
do you think
Westbrook, I mean, there's not, you just got to hope you're getting some leaps from these fringe guys like your Julian Strawthers and some of these guys on the back end of the rotation. So it's tough. It's a tough blow to lose KCP, but that is a very high payroll. I mean, that type of stuff was going to happen. You just have to hope that you can get more out of the guys who are your secondary stars around Jokic.
Yeah, Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, guys like that have to step up even more, obviously. Yeah, it comes down to the health of Jamal Murray because Jokic has been a horse to use, I guess, a name that he'd appreciate. I wonder about OKC. To me, is a team that can win 60 games this season. Isaiah Hartenstein being hurt is problematic, but like they are the one team that definitively, to me, got better, and we're already the number one team in the West, which makes them incredibly scary.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're a super popular pick, and I understand why. I mean, they're young. They still have a ton of avenues to improve the team even more. I think as far as the Hartenstein injury, it's not great, but they played all last year without a conventional, center, and now this provides more opportunity for Caruso to just slide in there, and they can go back to playing their, Chet at the 5, Jalen Williams kind of as a small ball 4 type of situation. So I think it's a team that is obviously going to be very dangerous. I haven't seen many people deviate from the assumption, at least during the regular season, that they're going to be the best team in the West. The people who go away from them seem to be just kind of hinging it on the hope that in the playoffs, their youth will be something that's maybe you have a chance to exploit it before they really become this powerhouse team. But I don't know, man. I mean, it's the fact that they could have up to 4 picks in next year's first round as well, probably 3, but maybe 4, is just wild. And obviously there's the tie in here with the Clippers doom hoping from that side of the ledger. But yeah, I mean, and it's hard to take issue with anything that they just the fact that they come away from this postseason. You look at last night's games, Mikal Bridges, 6 draft picks involved in that trade. Meanwhile, they turn Giddey into Caruso with no picks involved, and Hartenstein.
How, Chicago? What the hell are you doing? How do you not get a first out of that?
It's crazy. It's frustrating as somebody who I don't have to think about it as much because the Cavs have to get through Boston in the East. But there is a part of me that's like, okay, even if they eventually climb that mountain, there's this other team that no signs of them not being a player for a long, long time that they would also have to figure out how to probably get by. Assuming Oklahoma City does what everybody is projecting that they'll do in the next few years.
Like their margin for error may be so wide that their youth and experience won't matter. You know what I mean? Like they might be that good. I think SGA is going to win the MVP this season.
I do
based
too.
upon the fact that he could have last year.
Yeah, I'm with you there because again, a huge component of the MVP decision, if you already have incredible stats, is team success. They might have the best. I mean, they should. On paper, they should have the best defense in the NBA. You've got multiple guys who people will talk about as high odds candidates for Defensive Player of the Year, and Chet Holmgren, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, even Shea. Shea got votes last year, even though I think that was a little fraudulent, where on paper, I mean, you're looking at a guy who was already a first-team All-NBA guy, and now he may potentially be on the best or second-best team from a standing standpoint, and an analytical darling. Like, it's tough for me to pick against that.
As we head into a group of teams in the Western Conference that the Clippers might be fighting with, I hope, if things go their way. To me, I'm realistic about it. Brian Seaman has said the same thing. I think high end for them, if everything goes right, is a 6 seed, is just staying out of the play-in. I think that's best case scenario right now for the Clippers. So therefore, in that grouping, you're going to have teams like, well, not Minnesota, because I think they're still going to be a top 3, top 4 seed, but maybe the Dallas Mavericks and Phoenix Suns. And I don't think Dallas, while they may be better in the regular season somehow, they're not making the NBA Finals. I think they had the path of least resistance, or they had the right matchups to get there. No Kawhi. If Kawhi plays in the first round, I think it bounced then. But it didn't happen, and they lose Derrick Jones Jr. to the Clippers and bring in Klay Thompson. How do you think the Mavericks are going to perform this season? Now, you can make the argument they're going to have Gafford and PJ Washington for an entire season after they became, I think, maybe the best defense the last 20 games or whatever it was after they picked them up after the All-Star break or right before it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't love the Klay Thompson signing in terms of things that maybe would have made me even higher on that team. I just kind of feel like that was a lot of name value, and maybe there were better ways to maximize $15-some million. But that being said, I did like that they got Quentin Grimes in that deal to offload Tim Hardaway Jr. So that situation to me is kind of the way that I feel about the Milwaukee Bucks. If you told me they were back in the finals, would I be that surprised? No, but that's typically my assessment there, is because they just have such a transcendent top-end generational talent type superstar that he could probably do a lot of things that on paper don't make sense, or that you don't think that somebody should be able to do over a series of multiple games. And of course, Kyrie he's great. Even though he had his struggles like in the finals, he wasn't the guy that everybody thought maybe he would be in that series. It wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't pick them. But I would say, I think given what we know about where the Clippers are coming into the season, I don't think that that's a team you're going to run down in the regular season standings. But maybe you are. I don't know.
No, that'd be
to have that two-headed monster in the front court and, a full year of PJ and the continuity. And, I think they'll be a solid team.
People are saying, based upon one game and losing to the Lakers last night, Minnesota didn't look that good with their new roster. I think the Cat trade will hurt them. If it hurts them, guys, I think it's going to be really marginal. I do not think it's going to be significant. They're not going to be significantly worse. Like, Bob, last season, their defensive rating, Minnesota, was far and away better than the second best defensive rating. They were 2 points better per 100 possessions in front of Boston in that area. I can't see them dropping like 5 spots or something like that just because they lost Karl Anthony Towns. I don't see that happening. They're still going to be an elite defense, and offensively they were 17th last season. They might be able to be better this year.
Yeah, no, if you were to ask me, I kind of feel like I lean towards, I think I understand why the Knicks made the move, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it for the Timberwolves. And usually I think most people are inclined to criticize deals that have a strong financial component, especially with them being as close to being a true contender as they were last year, to get to that point and then make a move that had an element of shedding future salary cap implications. But I don't think there's many situations where you're going to take a guy with Cat's contract and all that goes with that and be able to turn him into two guys who, I think there was a distinct chance that it's like, even if Randall just proved to be an awful fit and they couldn't get him to kind of find his footing there, you still have Naz Reid. And then you have a guy who could just step in and potentially win 6th man of the year in Dante DiVincenzo this time to follow in Naz's footsteps. So I like what they did. I'm not going to base it off one game, just like I wouldn't do the same thing with what happened with the Knicks last night. There's going to be growing pains for any of these teams that made significant changes, and both those teams made significant changes. So I need to see it over the course of time. Do I think we're going to get that Anthony Davis every single night? No, of course not. So for them to have to face that kind of force and for the Lakers to get what they got out of Rui and LeBron was relatively quiet, but a lot of the other guys stepped up big last night and they just looked more physical. They were crashing the glass. They were creating second opportunities in a way that I don't think Minnesota was. I mean, Minnesota felt like they were kind of still in preseason mode a little bit there, finding their way. I don't think that will sustain. And same thing with the Knicks. It's like, I know there are people who are piling on because Bridges changed his form. He's not making his shots. You're getting cooked by this team hitting an absurd number of threes. You barely avoided having the record set against you. But there's a growing period where they're going to have to figure out, like last night, so much of that 5 out, making threes, trying to guard guys and drop.
You can't do it. You can't. No, if a team is hitting threes like that in 5 out, there's nothing you can do. Like, I don't think that people understand. They're like, oh, the Knicks sucked defensively last night. It's like, no. It's like you either give up a layup because nobody's there to protect the rim, or you give up an open three because they have you off balance.
I think the real thing that cost them there was, when they switch, they weren't closing out on guys like Tatum to the degree, like they're trying to go drop, and he doesn't need much space. And he was a flamethrower last night. He had 15 points in the first quarter. So, and that's to say nothing of the fact that, there were nights last season where after the first quarter, they had almost as many threes as some teams will have in a bad night of a full game. So, and to top that off, 33 to 3 assist to turnover ratio, like to get that type of play where, okay, you're not missing, you're not making mistakes. Yeah, I get it. The score looked horrific, but I thought Jalen Brunson was solid. I think the problem is he was doing his damage from inside the arc, and you can't trade 3 for 2 every possession down the court. Deuce McBride looked like he'll go a long way to filling in the vacuum of Dante DiVincenzo's minutes. I thought Cat started the game okay. Obviously, that wasn't Mikhail's best game, but in the second half, he definitely was much better than he was 0 for 4 in the first quarter. So this idea that those things, I don't like I know there's no other games on, so everybody's eyes are on those things. But you took a team that had this underdog mentality and you plopped in 2 high usage guys in Cat and Bridges, and maybe that will prove to have been a mistake. I certainly have my questions about the level of draft capital they gave for Mikal. I don't know if that was the best way to essentially, because now all their chips are in. This is the team that they're going to be. They're not exceptionally deep. They had to, I mean, they were running rookies out in the rotation last night, although down 20, who gives a shit? But I need time to see that, because if there's one thing from Knicks teams I've come to expect, and I don't think just losing Randall means they're going to abandon that, is the type of outperforming the talent level that they've consistently done over the course of 2 years. I need to give it time. Because, and again, that's an outlier great shooting performance early. That what are you going to do? There's going to be nights like that. Yes, they have to figure some stuff out. The Celtics were hunting those switches on Cat and Brunson, and there was too many possessions. Why the fuck is Jericho Sims trying to guard Jason Tatum when he's absolutely murdering you? They're going to have to figure that out. But that's going to be a problem for a ton of teams, because that team is ultra switchable on defense. Everybody can hit threes. And hell, even last night when they were playing 5 out, they still were finding their ways into offensive rebounds on these long missed threes that turn into additional opportunities at times.
Boston is legitimately perfectly constructed for the modern NBA. They are. And they won 64 games last season, I think it was, and the NBA championship. What are you going to do when that team has a historic night from 3? I don't think anyone else is hitting 29 threes on the Knicks this season. You brought up an interesting point, though. It's not going to be the Cat move that I think sinks them in the end, should they not contend for a championship. It's giving up that much for Mikal Bridges that I think could be the one that people look back on and say, oh, damn, that 100%. Was.
I think that's the far worse move. Yeah. I think that's the far worse move of the two, because it's also in a vacuum. It's like, okay, they added Cat to a front court where they had Mitchell out and they lost Hartenstein to the free agency market.
People forget about that too.
They were super thin up there. Whereas Mikal, they essentially shuffled Bogdanovich and 4 unprotected first round picks, a fifth like a pick swap, and then a 5th first round pick from another team, Milwaukee, I think, for him. And it's like, I'm not saying Mikal isn't good, but the replacement value over what you had, is it that significant that you want to essentially push all your chips into the table when there is a team that exists in the East, like a Boston, where you have to question, is it more prudent for us to try to stretch our timeline out so that we can maybe wait out the destruction of this Celtics team from the, crushing weight of the second apron? Because that's how I have to tell myself everything will be okay as a Cavs fan, is that, does it seem likely that in the short term, the Cavaliers are going to get past the Celtics? No, but maybe with the pressure of the financial constraints and the competitive advantage constraints of the second apron, that the Cavaliers can stick around long enough to be the team that ascends on the back end of that.
Good luck with that.
We're in that position. That's what you have to hope for.
It is. The problem is, though, and there's nothing you can do about it, their 2 stars aren't even 28 yet.
No, but I mean, it's not that different from if I was trying to rationalize how the Clippers could get to the top of the mountain, because OKC is just earlier in that timeline.
I know.
Extend and pay all their young stars, and they still have the draft capital to keep adding around the edges.
It's scary as hell. SGA could be a free agent in 2026, but my best hope right now, this is how bad things could be for Clipper Nation when it comes to watching OKC and what they're up to. The best hope might be that they do win a championship in the next 2 years. And that way, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander can say, I fulfilled my end of the bargain. You guys brought me in. I gave you this championship. And like LeBron, I can go, I have the freedom to move about the country, Southwest Airlines.
And I admit, I'm pleading ignorance on this one. Is there some history of comments about him being fixated on being in a big market?
No, not at all. He might plant his flag there and stay for the next 10 years. He could be one of those guys. He's into fashion.
You want to lose? I don't leave. Sorry, I don't see why you want to leave, because he's not taking criticism there. He's in a market that's been, historically very kind to its stars. I know KD had his dust ups and Russell Westbrook had their dust ups at moments, but if you can win, get paid, and kind of live a life off the radar. Not to mention how far your money's got to go in a place like Oklahoma City. I don't know why you'd be in a rush to leave. I would look at the future draft capital of that team and say, yeah, I'm not walking out the door.
This is as close as you can get to having a 5 to 7 year window in the history of the NBA, or at least in the new CBA. That's for damn sure. Can you help me with something here? This guy's been talking about this for a while, and I pushed back against it. Nate G says, salute, Adam. I respect all your hard work. I still disagree with your take about Zoo not expanding his range, especially versus bigs like Rudy. It takes him away from the rim. Example, AD last night. Like, AD is a unicorn. Talking about Ivica Zubac, just, hey, why don't you work more on jumpers when they haven't even featured him in the post or exploited how good he can be there yet? And some people already want him to change his game. It's like asking Jared Allen almost to do the same thing in some ways, because Zoo is kind of a similar player.
Threes, but I believe if he did, that he'd be knocking down, 40, 50% of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just about being generous and allowing your teammates to shine. It's not that you can't do it. I, for one, am excited for this Zoo season because due to the situation we're in with the people who departed and Kawhi's situation, this is finally a chance for him to play. And with a guy like Harden, if any of the guys were going to be left to play alongside of him, certainly there's some hope that that's going to unlock a much bigger role for Zoo this season.
It is the most glaring opening on the roster for him to get more shots, more opportunities, be more of the focal point, playing off of James Harden. I've talked about him he is the third most important player on this team because of what he already does defensively. Number 1 in rim protection last season. He's always top 5 there. But now in the offensive end, you have, a dearth of guys that can get easy buckets, and Ivica Zubac can. He shot, Bob, believe it or not, he was the best center from 5 to 9 feet out last season, field goal percentage-wise, is 64%. Better than Jokic. Now, Jokic took like 150 more of those shots, but Ivica Zubac still was, I think, around like 200. Like, it wasn't nothing. It was a real sample size, and he ended up averaging 7 shot attempts per game. Like, they aren't using him and I can understand last season because of all the Hall of Famers, but this season, this is his year. It has to be, and he just got the extension.
Yeah. Well, I share many of these frustrations. When you see a guy who's uber efficient, who just doesn't get shot attempts because of where he is in the pecking order, that's not different from Jared Allen or even Evan Mobley. I mean, Evan Mobley, 11 field goal attempts last season. It's tough when your team has a lot of guys who consume a lot of possessions. So I'm excited to see him. And even to some extent, I admit I didn't watch all your preseason games, but I saw the one where Jordan Miller went off, and I like a lot.
Which one?
Yeah, right. I forget who they were playing in the one that I was watching, but he was playing pretty well.
Their last game against Sacramento, probably, where he had 21.
That's the one. It was one of the last ones. So yeah, between him and I like the idea that maybe it's a pathway for guys like Kobe Brown and Miller and some of these guys to play a bigger role, and even the recently extended guys.
Nate G, if it was only that easy for Zoo to just pick up a jumper and show that he's consistent with it, it's like, again, there are very few big men that can do it all. AD is one of them. Trying to compare him and what he did to Gobert last night. And by the way, AD has not been that great with his jump shot.
Jump shooting, yeah. I mean, obviously last night he looked fantastic, but I think some of the people would criticize the fact that he settled for jumpers a lot when he has that physical and athletic advantage on the inside that he can get with much higher efficiency. I mean, yeah, last night he looked great. I know during their title run, he had his moments, but then there was a lot of suffering after that for quite a while where people were like, what are you doing, bro? You're shooting like 18% from 3 and you keep pulling up from there. Get in the post.
Yeah. One of my biggest examples of the bubble not being legit was actually Anthony Davis's shooting splits, because I'm not trying to hate, but he shot 50% on long twos and 38% on threes. There has never been a 20-game sample size like he had in those playoffs in the bubble in his career where he's ever shot it that well. I'm just saying. But yeah, the Clippers had won.
What Nate's saying though, like if you're gonna work it in, it's got to be like the early season is the time to kind of, okay, let's see if we can get some of these in the flow of the game. The thing I would push back against
If he even has that shot in his arsenal.
Well, I think taking things to take things is I wouldn't support that. But if he finds himself unguarded at the foul line at 15 to 18 feet out, and it's something that he feels comfortable taking, then sure, put him up.
There's no evidence of that. There's zero evidence of that. Does Jared Allen have that? Does he have a fadeaway from 18?
No, Jared Allen dunks on people. That's what he does. We don't need him to take those outside shots. We have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. But you know what? There's a vacuum it currently exists for the LA Clippers. And if Zoo wants to step through it, who am I to say no?
All right. Lastly here, because I know you got to run, Clippers are taking on Phoenix tonight at Intuit Dome. How do you view the Suns coming into this season? Because there seems to be a high variance of outcomes and a wide range of where people have them. Some have them, being a high play-in team or sixth like they were last season. Others have them a top 3 team in the Western Conference. I'm kind of impressed by their depth considering they're a second apron team, because that's the knock on them. Like, oh, they're way over the cap. They're paying all these guys, but they got Tyus Jones for nothing, basically. I like Monte Morris coming off the bench. People were criticizing them not having a ball handler to get it to their 3 stars, but now they kind of have that, and some decent role players. I mean, Grayson Allen's coming off the bench now. That's solid right there.
Yeah, I got to see some of their games against the Pistons this year. There's a couple things that I would say. First of all, I love Tyus Jones' ad. I think he's just a super smart player, doesn't turn the ball over, moves the ball on offense. A team that was one of the harshest criticisms of them is they're so dependent on guys creating and ISO scoring. Even if Tyus Jones can just get a few easy looks for them, for the other guys, I think he's going to be one of the most underrated acquisitions of the offseason when it's all said and done. Secondly, when it came to their rookie, Ryan Dunn, I think this is a guy who is going to far outperform where he was drafted.
You watch him much in college?
No, I didn't. I barely watched him at all.
But preseason.
He got drafted. Yeah, I watched the preseason games because I was watching the Pistons since we were playing them. I kind of wanted to see what was happening. And they played the Pistons twice, and then I caught a third game. It was because Dunn's first preseason game was so loud. He knocked down multiple triples, but he was tasked with stopping Cade Cunningham. The profile of him was somebody like a bigger Isaac Okoro. Everybody said this guy may be the best defender in the entire draft class, but he was presented like this raw offensive guy, which he very well may be. I'm not going to base it on shooting fairly well from 3-point range in the preseason. But what he showed was in that Phoenix system where that wasn't a team with overwhelming depth. You don't need a guy who's going to put up a bunch of shots. If he can even just be remotely similar to what we saw in preseason, which is a monster on defense who you can rely on to knock down some spot up threes and make some hustle plays, then he's going to be a perfect fit for the system that Phoenix has in place. And for them to be coming off this, I never like putting too much faith in where guys are going to land in the standings for a team that has a guy at the point in his career that a Kevin Durant is. I mean, and Booker's had some long injuries during the regular season in the past. I think
Beal.
Yeah, I think it's a situation though where if they stay relatively healthy, you could get a better Beal season than you did last year. I think Dunn is going to be an important addition to their bench. I think Plumlee may be, I think Plumlee will help even out some of the unevenness we saw from Yusuf Nurkic last year.
Okay, hold on. This is where I saw Mason Plumlee all last season. He looked as close to wash as you could get for a backup center role playing 10 to 12 minutes a night.
Sure. But is he going to get 4 or 5 fouls in the first quarter and then you're having to rely on Bol to play heavy minutes or a rookie and also like
his rim protection is brutal. I think guys were over 63% at the rim against Plumlee last year. He's always out of position.
There's absolutely, you can't fix everything in one offseason. Yeah. I guess I just feel better about their overall depth. They brought Royce O'Neal back. Like you said, Grayson Allen is in a situation where he may not have to play as much as he did last year as their, primary bench threat. There'll be more pieces available to them. So in that regard, I think, Tyus is probably the thing I'm most excited about, to have Monte behind him and then to have Dunn. I don't think it's such a huge step down from Yusuf Nurkic that if Plumlee can stay on the court more, then fine. it's a fine trade out. You can swap those two out, and if the Phoenix Suns are going to succeed, obviously it's still going to come down to the health and availability of their primary stars. But I do think two of the more underrated moves of the offseason were bringing in Tyus for nothing and done with such a find in a draft that was considered a relatively weak one. I think he's in almost the perfect situation team-wise for him to achieve what he's trying to do.
I'm worried about him tonight. I'm worried about them in general being reinvigorated with Coach Bud. And after getting swept last year in the first round against Minnesota, they're going to come out playing like their hair is on fire, as VTB would say. It may be a tough game for the Clippers. Phoenix is good. First game at Into a Dome. I do want to bring up how Bob is the guy when I was on a live here recently on Clippers Talk that I texted in real time, is Pete Nance any good? I said Clippers need a PG. I meant a power forward, obviously.
Yeah.
But Bob said, no, he is not good. Pete Nance, who was let go by you guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, Pete, obviously between him and Isaiah Mobley, we had a couple of what you could label as Nepo two-ways last year. I thought Mobley was better than him. And we didn't even sign him to a two-way. And then this year, the two-ways got taken up by, JT Thor, Amani Bates, and Luke Travers. So he found his way kind of the odd man out. I think the problem with Nance is he's a good three-point shooter, I think, for a big man. But in terms of having to guard his position, I don't think it can apply on an NBA level. I'm just not super confident that you can give him big minutes on an NBA level. He's one of those guys who you look at the fact that he's willing to take shots from the outside and his G League stats are reasonably good. And then you plug him in and you think, okay, on an NBA level, I think I would need a little bit more beef if we're going to use him in the front court, because there's just guys who are so physical and much bigger than him that maybe he's getting guys younger and earlier on in their physical maturation when he's playing in the G League.
I just don't understand. This guy, Nate G, can't let it go. Like, he can shoot jumpers in the past. Dude, he's taken like 5 maybe as a Clipper. Total. Maybe. I'm sorry, but this is coming from an uninformed place right here, Nate G. There is no reason to believe that Ivica Zubac can shoot jumpers. There's nothing to base that in. There's no reality. Earth 2, nothing to say Ivica Zubac can do it. Are there any moves? What were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, who do you want to kind of fill the offensive vacuum for the Clippers?
Well, Ivica Zubac obviously has to be a big part of that. I think he needs to get around 15 and 10, 16 and 11. But they're starting Norman Powell. Norman Powell could get you an efficient 19. He can. Like, he's proven it multiple times before. So the easy answer to make up for losing Paul George and all that scoring is just Norm showing up in a bigger role this season, which is very possible. The problem is right now they're also trying to make up for not having Kawhi. So you go from saying like, we just got to make up for this guy that we lost that was getting 22 points per game or 23 a game. And now it's like, well, now it's 47 points a game. You got to make up for it with Kawhi being out currently. Everyone's talking about your voice doesn't match the face. I don't know what that means. Some people are saying I should mute Nate G. Maybe I should. That's my thing. I send people into the void and mute them for like 10 minutes. There are rules here.
Cool down? Is that like a cool down where you can't?
That's a good way to put it. Okay. Yeah. Put you in the penalty box for a second here and rethink some of your positions in basketball and in ball life, because I'm trying to bring some higher level conversation. So I won't suffer fools gladly here on Clippers Talk, Bob. And it's kind of just a fun game that we play where I'll mute people. But I should ask, like, are there any trades to be made between the Clippers and Cavaliers where they can help each other? People have brought up Isaac Okoro here or Kuru here on Clippers Talk.
We have the same issues as you. I mean, if you were looking for a power forward, that's the same thing. Max Strus is down with this injury. Apparently, he sprained his ankle stepping on the foot of a coach, and he'll be out for at least 6 weeks before he's reevaluated. So in that window, it looks like they're going to start Dean Wade, who was our backup 4-5. So if he's now the starting 3, you're going to have to figure out how to fill the minutes of when Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are on the bench. I don't know how they're going to do it. Last year, they played George Niang a ton. No Cav fan really wants him playing heavy minutes in the rotation because he's essentially just a three-point shooter. So I don't know what you guys really have to offer the Cavs. They're too heavy on wings as it is. They've got the rookie, Jalen Tyson. They've got Okoro. They've got Strus. They've got Karis LeVert. Hell, even Sam Merrill, who's not really a wing, he's a 2-guard. I mean, all those guys are going to be competing for the same minutes. And you have Ty Jerome, who after missing the entire season last year is back there. I think there's a place for a consolidation trade for Cleveland, potentially, knowing that LeVert.
Hey, same with the Clippers.
But I don't think there's a lot of people who are offering the thing that they really lack, which is either a big wing who can slide between the 3 and the 4, or a 4-5 who could be a backup that we could use, in the case of a Allen or Mobley injury. So I don't think there's much of a trade partner scenario that exists for our teams this year anyway. We don't want what's the situation with PJ Tucker? Is he still on the squad?
Marcus Morris did well for you guys. Why not try PJ Tucker next?
Marcus Morris had one great game in the playoffs and then called Jared Allen a pussy, and that's why he's not on the team this year. So, I don't need to bring in any more of these people who are trying to relive their glory days and can't accept the role that they're in.
Yeah, but I mean, PJ just started a game 6 in the playoffs somehow for the Clippers. Like, are you sure you want to pass on a guy like that who makes $11 million? Yeah, it's a brutal situation.
How irate the Cavs fandom would be if after they're complaining about 6'6" small forwards. If we roll out a power forward the size of PJ, there'll be a riot.
Yeah, well, good luck to you guys this season. The Cavs are my East Coast team now, or my Eastern Conference team, just because of you. No issue with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
That's what I like to hear. And I know the Duke has got to be insufferable today with Anthony Davis. So I'm glad that you're working from home right now, because I wouldn't want to have to be around them.
I've never seen the Duke of Sports here in the chat, even though last night I was talking a lot of Lakers, unfortunately, because they were the only game that was on. But at some point, I'm sure he'll come on. Maybe we'll do a Lakers podcast with him on Clippers Talk when they take them on 4 times in the Pac-Div this season. He is the great Bob Schmidt, voice of AM 570 LA Sports. Can you say something for me? Because people bring this up all the time. Clippers Talk with Adam Oslin. Like, do your real promo voice.
Okay. Clippers Talk with Adam Oslin.
Yeah. See, I told you. It's Bob Schmidt.
You got new stuff coming today. I did your Clipper Talk open last night, and I did your Clipper Talk close last night, because we are now at the point where those shows will debut after every game.
My man, just because the Dodgers are in the World Series doesn't mean you don't matter. Come on, we're looking out for you. Tonight, pregame starts at 6 p.m. from Intuit Dome. Clippers countdown. Tip off at 7 with Carlo Jimenez. Bob, where can everybody find you? We played one of your videos earlier. People should see more of that stuff. And also keep an eye on the Cleveland Cavaliers this season, because it's fun. I've always had like an NFC team and an AFC team and another team that I can look at in the other conference. And we have one with the Cavs here.
Yeah, well, they can find the pod wherever you get podcasts. It's the Fear the Fro Podcast, at Fear the Fro Pod on Twitter. The YouTube is the same. And the YouTube is, you won't even find the podcasts on there. You're just going to get basically parody songs and attack pieces on Tim Bontemps. So doesn't have many subscribers. I think 200 when I last looked. I'm expecting someday for it to be yanked down. But in the meantime, there is 20, 25 creations from over the past 3-4 seasons that are all up there. So,
and I played the most tame one, guys. There is some real salty, crazy stuff going towards Draymond Green that you might appreciate. There's worse stuff happening with him talking about Joel Embiid on there with all the song parodies. You'll really enjoy this. Yeah, SC says it. Fear the Fro.
Fear the Fro, indeed.
All right, Bob. Thanks so much for doing this. This has been another edition of a Clippers Talk Live. Talk to you later tonight from Intuit Dome, right back here on Clippers.